up, y'all? It's HRay, just dropping a little word into your week. I hope this message encourages you, blesses you, and most of all, inspires you to keep going higher. And don't forget to check out HRay Praise Tuesdays live at 9 a.m. on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
For the last 5 years, I've been going through this struggle in my mind, and I haven't been able to settle. And everything looked crazy. But I kid you not, in the last 5 weeks, everything that did not make sense in the last 5 years, God brought it all together. And before I give you anything out of James, I want to tell you that that's what the Spirit of the Lord is saying for somebody in this room today. I don't care if it's been 5 years. I don't care if it's been 5 months. I don't care if you feel like it's been 5 lifetimes. We serve a God who is able to redeem the time. So I tell you, you better sit back. You better put your glasses on the edge of your nose like Maxine Waters. Tilt your head forward and say, Lord, I'm serving notice to the devil on today that I'm reclaiming my time, because God's promise is not slack concerning you. For what he's promised on your life, he's able to perform. And so on this last day of this year, James chapter 1, starting at the 2nd verse says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given unto him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Verse 5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Thank you. You may have your seats in the presence of the Lord. Thank you, ushers. Thank you, nurses. Consider it all joy when you fall into various trials. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk to you concerning the topic there's always more. 2012, 5 years ago, November, I believe it was, I preached a sermon, and it was called The Aftermath. It came from 1 Peter, and it talked about after you go through a few things, that God will perfect you, that he'll strengthen you, he'll establish you, he'll settle you. And I lived on that sermon because I believed that what was coming was better than what had been. But I realized just about 5 weeks ago that for the last 5 years I had been living on the aftermath, but I had never considered the process. And I believe that that is the disservice that the church is doing to believers today. We focus on what's to come is better, what's to come is better, what's to come is better. We focus on the storm that we're in and how the storm is tearing us up and tearing us down. We put all the attention on the storm, but we never look at what the storm is supposed to teach us. We always look at what we're waiting to come from it, what the intended outcome is, what's going to be good from this, but we never look at the process. When I look at this year that we've been in, I started telling people this in January, and people look at me crazy when I say stuff because they don't understand where it's coming from, but when I hear it, I speak it. And I've been telling people all year, you got to make some decisions this year, and that the decisions that you make this year would impact your life for the next 30 years. We laughed at it a few months ago because I said that to a friend of mine in January, and in September she closed on a house, and I looked at her and I said, how many years does your house know? She said 30 years. My God. I said, oh, okay. You better be connected. Be careful who you were connected to this year. You better be careful of who was connected to you, because decisions This year, this particular year, charts destiny for you even into the next 30 years. And whether it made sense to you or not, whether it makes sense to you or not today, guess what? You still have about 15 hours to make some decisions that you ain't made in the last 364 days. I know you thought I came here to let you off the hook, but I'm coming here today to tell you that until you move on the last decision that the Lord told you to make, until you follow the last instruction that he gave you, he's not getting ready to speak anything new to you. That's a hard truth to accept because we want something fresh. We want the Lord to declare over our lives, behold, I'll do a new thing and it's going to spring forth. But what is the point of something new if you haven't done the last thing he said? So guess what? While you're sitting in here today, I would pull out a pen and a paper, and yes, I'd take some notes on what the preacher is saying, but I'd go through my own faith file and see where I didn't move on my faith this year, so that by the time I get up out of here today, I can go make some phone calls. I can go make some visits. I can tell some people goodbye as I should have 5 months ago, but I stayed in that holding pattern. Yeah, this year was a year of decisions. And if you have not made them, you're still going to have to make them. Because as my good friend Brian Keith likes to say, whatever you didn't deal with this year, it's going to deal with you next year. So you may as well get it together. I had been dealing with the aftermath. I had been waiting to be perfected and established and strengthened and settled. But I hadn't considered that what I may be going through may be for my benefit rather than my detriment. And it took me to James chapter 1. See, James told us some stuff. We like to always say the effectual, fervent prayer of the righteous availeth much. We always like to say, be doers of the word and not forgetful hearers. We like to say that God gives more grace to the humble. But before James ever said any of that, he wanted to make sure that we understood that as believers, we will go through some trials and some tribulations. And so he wanted to make sure we knew how to handle it. Yes, you will go through some trials and tribulations. James said it. Peter said that after you've suffered a little while. Peter said that don't think strange when the fiery darts come at you. And if you don't want to hear James and Peter, it was Jesus who said, in the world, you will have tribulations. And just like Jesus followed his up with be of good cheer, James tells us to count it all joy. And so the thing about it is, if you're going to understand that there's more out there, you've got to begin to make it all count. You got to begin to make it all count. See, James said count it all. But I'm telling you today, you got to make it all count. Because, see, there's something to learn in your trials. See, the first thing you understand when you understand that there's more is that your trials help you to understand that there's more to you than you think there is. Your trials put you in a place of transparency. Your trials put you in a place where your pride has to sit down. That's why James starts this book with introducing himself as James, a bondservant. See, if you really study scripture, you'll know that James was the half-brother of Jesus, and James could have gave himself a little more credit by starting the first verse off by saying, I'm James, and I'm Jesus' brother. Everybody would have stopped and listened. But no, if you really want to understand the things of God, you'll understand that humble is the way. And so your trials have a way of humbling you. Your trials have a way of making you become a little more transparent, so that you don't become a detriment to yourself. And see, when he was talking about trials, you got to understand, he was talking to believers here. He was talking to believers. He wasn't talking to people who were in the world, who didn't know Jesus. He was talking to people who said they had faith, who professed a hope in a risen Savior. He was letting them know that even though you believe Jesus, yeah, you're going to experience some stuff. So get ready for it and count it all joy. Your trials make you transparent. Your trials, the trials he spoke of wasn't just the things of God or those deep things or those mysteries that need to be unlocked. They were everyday trials. They were, I can't afford to pay my car note. I can't afford to pay my rent. My child won't act right. I need to make this move, but I'm worried about what everybody else is going to think. It's regular, everyday trials that he was talking about. And even in that, he still said, count it all joy. You count it all joy. It makes you transparent. It brings you to a place of humbleness. It brings you to a place where you can literally say, hey, I really don't have the cash to do this for you. And you'll see who's still for you and who's against you. See, every time we look at our trials, I'm going somewhere with this. Every time we look at our trials, we begin to look at the stuff that we lose in our trials. We begin to look at, oh, I lost some friends. Oh, I may have lost a job. Oh, I lost a home. I lost this. I lost that. But what did you gain in going through? When you lost those friends, did you gain a little peace? Trials not only help you become a little more transparent, they help you become ready for transition. They help you become ready for transition. I used to watch this show. I'm a real TV head. And as a kid, I never understood why I watched this show, but I would always watch the TLC channel, you know, Tender Love and Care, or the Learning Channel. And it was a show called The Baby Story. It may or may not still come on, but I always watched A Baby Story. I watched it like every day. I would watch repeats and I would watch reruns, and it was crazy to me because I ain't never, and I still don't, y'all pray for the preacher, I ain't never wanted no kids, but I would always watch A Baby Story. And so I watched it, and last night as I was studying for this, I thought about The Baby Story. And every episode, it would start the same way. You would have this mother who was bursting and shining and happy, and she was walking around all plump and like, yes, I'm just about 4 days from delivery, and I just can't wait. And then they flip the scene, and you see 2 days later, mama's in labor and delivery, and mama didn't look like the same bright and shiny mama that she looked the other day. She would get all upset, and she was in angst, and she was in pain, and you could tell that it was some trials going on. But as soon as the baby was delivered, it was like all those trials went away, and the mother transitioned from angst to joy. Your trials will prepare you for transition. What area is God trying to shift in your life? And you've been going through trials. You've been going through situations. You've been filled with anxiety. You've been filled with angst. You've been plagued, and you didn't understand what was going on. But you need to see that God has been preparing you for transition. See, it would never be in some circumstances that we would move on until trials come. I worked a job 2 years ago, and every single day this woman came to my office and got on my nerves. Every single day of every single month that woman came to my job. My mama's shaking her head, yeah, because she knows. Every day that lady came to my office, and for a while I was mad at her, and I won't call her name. I like to call her ODB. You can make up whatever that needs to mean to you. Those are her initials. Hallelujah. But every day this woman would come to my office, and come on back to church, y'all. Hallelujah. Every day she would come to my office, y'all. Some days I would call my mama, and I would just lay on my office floor, and I would just cry, and I did not understand it. And then I heard the Lord begin to whisper a word into my ear that didn't make sense, and that word was resign. And one day I got the faith to get up and to go resign, and on that day I had so much peace. It looked so crazy. But what trials in your life are pushing you to do something greater? I could have stayed in that office. I could have stayed on that job. But what trials in your life are pushing you to maximize the potential and the capacity that you have within yourself? What is God trying to pull out of you that he keeps taking you through some things? And see, the year that we're in and getting ready to go into, some of y'all have been in some cycles. Some of us have been in some cycles, and we've been waiting on those cycles to end. But just like I told you, he's not going to give you a new instruction until you obey the last one. He's not going to take you out of that cycle until you master what he's trying to show you. Where is God trying to bring you up to? He's not just trying to shift you to a new level. He's trying to shift you to a new dimension. He's trying to push you through some open doors. He's trying to push you through some gates. He's trying to push you through some portals. And the only way he can get you there is through your trials. So you've got to begin to count it all joy and make those trials count. See, you make it count by understanding. It says, knowing that trials work patience. The faith God is trying to give you in this season of your life is an enduring faith. It's a faith that I'm going to run on and see what the end is going to be. It's a faith that though he slay me, yet will I trust him. It's a faith that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's a faith that I would have fainted lest I believe to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. It's a kind of faith that makes you say it was good that I was afflicted, so that I can finally sit down and get in your word and learn something about you, and not just learn it, but live it. It's that kind of faith that God is trying to get inside and instill in us. It's that kind of faith that he's trying to push us through. God didn't have you sitting off your job for 9 months to a year for you to just sit there and wallow in your pity. No, he's trying to get you to a place where you understand that he's the source and the finish. It's him who supplies every need. And so you begin to make it all count. You count because you know it's not really about your trials, but it's about the test of your faith. And so my faith needs to begin to bear and produce fruit. The Lord is trying to see if he can trust you with the next place he's trying to take you. It's not a question of whether you're ready or not. Some of y'all been ready in your mind. It's, can I trust you? Yes, you have the skill set. Yes, you have the ability. But can I trust you? Do you have the character and integrity to endure when the trials start coming? Because see, I could have preached y'all real happy today, but that ain't what he told me to do. He told me to come here and preach because see, you had trials yesterday. Some of y'all got trials today. Midnight's gonna strike, you're gonna pop a cork or two, and then you'll still have trials tomorrow. Count it all joy. No matter what day it is, no matter what year it is, count it all joy because your trials work patience. Some of us are too pressed to move on to the next thing. And when we get there, we mess it up. And then we got to come back and get it together. Pastor, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back and get it right this time. I appreciate it. Sometimes the Lord will take you full circle so that you can go back to some similar situations of your past so you can get it right so that when you move on, you don't have to go through that test again. Where's God trying to shift you? What trials are working patience in your life? And are you ready to throw in the towel? Are you ready to amp your faith up and begin to endure? Because see, it's easier to submit to the difficult things in our lives than it is to submit to the will of God. It's easier to submit to the difficult things in our lives than it is to submit to the will of God. Because see, when you are charged with the task of submitting to the will of God, that makes you have to be obedient to the will of God. And you may not like the will of God. And so your obedience or your perceived obedience will make you have to start counting up the cost. James didn't say count the cost. He said count it all joy. And so when you begin to count the cost, your trials will try to make you lose sight of what his will is for you. And when you lose sight of his will, you've got to begin to make the right call. You got to begin to make the right call. That's what James said in verse 5. He said, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. If any man lacks wisdom, ask of God. Now, when we think about wisdom, we think about knowledge, we think about understanding, we think about maybe I need to read my Bible cover to cover, and yes, all of that is true and it's great. But the wisdom that James is talking about in verse 5 is the will of God for your life. What is the will of God for my life? Once I begin to make those trials count, once I begin to see that it's really working out something for my betterment, it don't matter how much stuff I lose, it's just bringing me to a place where I can be submissive to the will of God. I got to begin to make the right call. And so understanding it, knowing that I'm going through these trials and I don't understand them, then I got to step back and say, Father, I stretch my hands to thee, for no other help I know. Why am I going through this? What would you have me to see from where I am in my life right now, today? What is it that you really want to get out of me? That's what he means by if you lack wisdom. If you don't know which way to go, what pastor preached the sermon, what to do when you don't know what to do. When you don't know what to do, you ask of God. And it's the same ask that you find in Matthew 7:7 that says, ask and it will be given. Seeking you will find. Knocking the door will be open. Some of us aren't asking for the right things. And see, when you find out that there's more to yourself, you'll begin to understand that there's more that you can require from God. Because as his child, I have a right to go boldly before the throne of grace. I have a right to make some petitions. I have a right to ask God why. They always tell us it's wrong to know. Ask him why. But be sensitive to the answer that he gives us. Some of us don't talk to God because we don't like the stuff that he shows us. Some of us don't talk to God because we don't know where to find the answers, and it's staring us right in the face. You ask God for patience, and then he puts you in your car on the freeway behind somebody who's driving real slow, and you either want to get over and cut them off to show them how to drive a little bit faster, or you want to get on the side of them and show them something that you shouldn't show them, or you want to do something that's out of your character, out of your integrity, but you ask God for patience. All my friends know I used to drive real crazy. Sometimes I drive behind a slow car and they look like, why won't you get over? And I'm like, I asked the Lord for patience. And he teaches it in different ways, but you have to begin to look for those answers that you're asking for. If any man lacks wisdom, ask of God, who gives liberally. Liberally, generously. You know how sometimes you can ask somebody for something and they say, let me see if I have it. Or they say, I was supposed to do this, but if I don't do that, then I'll help you out. Or they'll say, I really just don't feel like driving to your house right now. Or they'll say, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about, right? But when you ask God for something, it says that he's going to give it generally, liberally. He's going to open up a window and pour out a blessing that you won't have room enough to receive. He's going to anoint your head with oil that your cup runneth over. He's going to supply all your need according to his riches in glory. That's the kind of generally, liberally, freely that it's talking about. So you ain't got to never be scared to ask God for something, because he's standing there with hands open wide, waiting to bless you. He just wants you to open up your mouth and say, Father, I need a blessing. Some of us have been sitting quiet for too long. That's why I tell you every Sunday, reach down in your belly and shout unto God with a voice of triumph. He's waiting to hear from you. He can hear from the pastor on your behalf. He can hear from me on your behalf. But what happens when you open your mouth and begin to cry out unto God? David said he heard me and he delivered me from all of my tribulation. That's what he said. That's what will happen when you begin to open up your mouth. Somebody just try it. Open your mouth and bless the Lord right now. Come on, come on, come on. See, we let it drop too fast. Come on and bless him. The first thing you got to do is admit that you don't know what to do next. That's why it says, if any man lacks wisdom. Some of us walk around pretending like we got it all together, like we know what's going on, like we know what the next step is, and we really don't. And then we get ahead and we get out in front, and then we begin to lead people the wrong way because we thought we knew best. But the Bible tells us to ask God. Now, James will tell you that faith without works is dead. So please don't ever believe that you can sit on your blessed assurance and just pray all day and night and God's just going to do it. No, he's going to give you the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding. He's going to give you the tools and the resources so you can put them in place, so you can get up and get active, so you can see him move in what it is you were trying to do. So make it all count. Make the right call. And the thing about making the right call is you got to make the call right. Make the right call, but you have to make the call right. Somebody look at verse 6. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man and unstable in all his ways. I told y'all last Sunday, I believe it was, that I had been praying for God to do something. This is what I was praying for. I was praying for God to do this thing. And I called a friend of mine called me 5 weeks ago. And she said, I'm getting ready to move to Chicago in 6 months. I said, really? Okay. You gonna quit your job? And she was like, didn't you just quit yours? And I was like, oh, well, I did. So I said, okay. She said, so I called to see when you are gonna go to school because you've been talking about this for too long. And I told her I had a plan, and my plan was 6 months down the road. And she said, if you follow that plan, you'll follow it. And 5 years from now, we'll still be talking about the move you still need to make. And after I got off the phone with her, I didn't ask her anything else, because if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. So I began to pray. And I laid on my face, literally dust in my face, breathing dust. Jesus, I need you. And he spoke to me. You got to listen. And he said, I never changed the promise. You changed the declaration. And your change of declaration changed the timeline. See, the thing was, I was asking God to do something that I didn't know if I was really ready for, and it caused me to lack in my faith. It caused me to be in a place where I know you're able, and I've seen you do it. I didn't sit for a year and a half out of a job that I thought I was going to have for the rest of my life, and I've seen you open doors. I've seen you make ways. I've seen you take care of me. I've seen what you can do, but now I don't have the faith to do what you're telling me to do, and I know you're telling me to do it. See, we'd rather stay in our difficult situation than submit to the will of God. But when you begin to make the call right, you begin to make the call in faith. You begin to be like the woman that had the issue of blood that said, you know what, I've been sitting in this cycle too long. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to press my way. I can't be worried about who's looking at me. I can't worry about any of that. I'm going to begin to just press my way, because if I can get to the master, then I know that every answer that I need will be there. It'll be like the man who laid by the pool of Bethesda, who was counting on everybody else. But when Jesus showed up, Jesus taught him how to make his trials count for him. He taught him how to make the right call and to make it in faith. You got to begin to open up your mouth and make some faith declarations. You got to begin to open up your mouth and say, you know what, my child will not fail or fight another year in school. You got to open up your mouth and say, you know what, I'm not going another month without a job. You got to open up your mouth and say, I'm not going another month without submitting the business plan that I should have submitted last year this time. You got to open up your mouth and say, I've been waiting to finish this degree, and I just need to go get back in school and finish those little bitty classes so I can get on with the rest of my life. You got to open up your mouth and say, I'm going to do what the will of the Lord is for my life. It's got to be that personal. You got to look at yourself and say, I'm going to stay with my husband even though I feel like I should leave him because the Lord told me to. And if you don't believe me, go read the book of Hosea on your own time. My God, that was for free. But whoever it was for, you got to begin to ask those questions in faith. And when you do it, you'll find out that his grace really is sufficient for you, and his strength really is made perfect in your weakness. Y'all, I really wanted to shout. Martha asked me, was I going to jump up and down? I wanted to, Martha. But the thing about it is, people are hurting, y'all. People are broken. People come in here so broke down every week at the point of suicide, and we never take the chance to look at them and say, hey, I've been where you are. Let me help you understand so you can make these trials count. So you can make the right call and make it right. Make that call in faith, y'all. And see, the thing is, James, I love the book of James because it's almost an illusion of Jesus. As I was really looking at this, they didn't even want to put the book of James in the Bible because it didn't talk about Jesus too much. But how much are we talking about Jesus, but we ain't trying to live like him? Because that's the will of God for our lives. That's the place he's trying to take us. He's trying to get us to a place where we know his grace is sufficient and he gives more grace and more grace and more grace. But we get to the point where we stop abusing that grace and we realize, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Heaven forbid. No. And we stop in our tracks. And as believers, we begin to live holy so that the world that's looking at us will have a pattern of holiness to follow, because holiness is still right. And that's what counting it all joy does. It says that you grow so that you lack nothing. That you be perfected and that you lack nothing. That word perfected ain't talking about having a perfect walk, because we can never do it, but you can have a perfected mind. You can have a mind that knows how to resist the devil and he'll flee. You'll have a mind that when somebody comes up to you and says the wrong thing, you can look back at them and say, I know what you said, but it is written. Let no corrupt communication come from your mouth. Hallelujah to Jesus. God bless you. So that you become better. Forget everybody else, because the better you become, the better you will enable everybody else to become. If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. So you got to make that call. You got to make it right, make it in faith. James didn't really talk about Jesus. He just showed us how to live like Jesus. And if you're really looking at what James wrote, it takes you back to Matthew chapters 5 through 7, where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. And so if you're ever looking for Jesus in James, go back to Matthew and parallel it, and then you'll begin to see that Jesus was somebody who didn't deserve any trials. But the Father said, I need to send you down. And so instead of complaining, Jesus counted it all joy, and he began to make those trials count. He went about doing good. He went about healing the sick and raising the dead. Even when they told him he was wrong, he still told the man on the Sabbath, hey, stretch out your hand, and his hand returned restored. He was a Jesus who could do that because he had to show us how to live it so James could write about it, right? He's a Jesus who showed us how to make the right call, because in the garden on that night when he was about to be arrested, he said, Father, if it be your will, let this cup, I prayed that prayer, let this cup pass from me. Because it's easy to be in a place where you have a platform. It's easy to be in a place where you can freely use your gift. It's easy to be in a place where you can speak to people and they listen. It's easy to be in a place where you know you got somewhere to call home every Sunday. It's easy to be in a place where you can stand up with a mic in your hand and people choose to listen. But if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. You see, he made the right call. Then he made the call right. Not my will, but thine be done. And they arrested Jesus. They took him up to a hill called Calvary. They put him on an old rugged cross where they stretched him wide. And even there, he was still making the right call, and he was making the call right. Because he said, Father, forgive them. He already knew 2017 was going to be here. That's why you can count it all joy. That's why you can give it up and submit to his will, because he knew we'd be here today. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. See, he even did something for John and for Mary. He looked down at Mary and John and see, when you feel like Jesus had left you alone, you got to start looking at who he placed around you. Because he looked down from that cross and he said, son, behold your mother, and mother, behold your son. He said, I'm never going to leave you alone. He told everybody else, I'm not even going to leave you alone, because when I leave, the Comforter will come. And I know somebody knows something about the Comforter. He's a wonderful counselor. He'll lead you into all grace and truth. He kept making the right call and making the call right when he said, Father, it is finished, and into thine hands I commend my spirit. At that time, the assignment was done, so we thought. So they took him down, they put him in a borrowed grave. But on the third day, Jesus bust up out of the grave. So we didn't have to fear our trials and our tribulations anymore, because he took the sting from death and the victory from the grave, so that we walk this earth knowing that this earth is not our home. We're just strangers passing through. And if you're a stranger passing through, on Christ the solid rock you better stand, because all other ground will be sinking sand. But God has a plan for your life, South Union. He's got a plan. What I love about this church, I'm going to tell you guys, this is a place of shift. This is a place of shift. Whether you know it or not. People who don't know Jesus, people who knew Jesus, come in this place and they reconnect. When we got here in 2005, we were broken. We had been through some trials. We had been in a place where we didn't have nowhere to live. But God took care of my mama so she could take care of us. And y'all didn't know it, but y'all were taking care of us too. Y'all gave us something to call family and community when everything was breaking up around us. I'll never forget that. You got to make it all count, y'all. The process is what really counts because your faith will be strengthened in the process. Don't worry about what's coming. It'll be better. Your latter will be greater. I'll tell you that. Your latter will be greater. But trust the process. Because it's in the process that you learn how to appreciate the greater that is coming. Make it all count. Make the right call. Make the call right. Count it all joy. Amen.